Howdy, and welcome to Wise About Texas, the Texas History Podcast. This is your host, Ken Wise. Thanks so much for tuning in today for a little Texas history. I want to start by saying thank you so much for the feedback on the America 250 episode. I really appreciate it. I thought that might be a nice opportunity to think about Texas's place in the United States and how Texas has always played a role on this continent in the major events. And of course, the most major arguably being the American Revolution. So, as they say, keep those cards and letters coming, and really appreciate you listening. Today, we're going to go on a little road trip. You know, this episode's being recorded and released in the summer of 2026. Like so many Texans, I hit the road usually in the summer and head to the mountains. And really, when I drive from southern Texas to the place in Colorado where I go, I never leave the old Republic of Texas, and that's kind of interesting to think about. So today, we're going to discuss the boundaries of the Republic of Texas and where you might end up going on your summer road trips. So let's get in the car and hit the road and get wise about Texas. Let's set the scene in 1836 when Texas gained her independence. And let's talk about New Spain. So if you look at a map of North America, and you can Google this up, I'm going to describe it. Spain claimed Florida. It claimed a strip of land as part of Florida that included the southern parts of Alabama and Mississippi over to New Orleans, which of course was in the Louisiana territory, and of course the province of Texas. They claimed land west of there in what is New Mexico, basically the western part of all of the western part of the United States, with the exception of Oregon and Washington, now present-day Oregon and Washington, which were disputed and claimed by the British. So now this is 1836, so much of that had not even been explored yet, but Spanish Louisiana, or what is called Spanish Louisiana, probably took up the greatest amount of that territory. But then you also had what on Spanish maps would be called Nuevo Mexico, Nuevo California, Nuevo Navarra, and of course Texas. So that's the situation in 1836. We declare independence, and we didn't really, in the Declaration of Independence, it didn't describe the borders as you would expect in a Declaration of Independence. But we were claiming the province of Texas, whatever that really turned out to be. Then the Texas Revolution, of course, resolved successfully, and two treaties, Santa Anna signs two treaties, one public, one secret. And Santa Anna pledged that Mexico would not contest Texas claims to the territory north of the Rio Grande. Now, the Mexican government, because Santa Anna was captured, later refused to recognize the treaties that their president had signed and repudiated them. So Mexico kept claiming Texas as part of Mexico, even though Mexico had lost the war. But for sure, Mexico made a strong claim for the border of Texas being the Nueces River rather than the Rio Grande. So they created a gap that we still to this day call the Nueces Strip, the area between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande. We had our first election, Texas had our first election in September 1836. Legislature begins meeting in October of 1836, and in December of 1836, the Republic of Texas passes what's called the Boundary Act. So this is a situation where the government just passes an act declaring what Texas claimed as the boundaries. Now here, you need to think about what that meant in 1836. And actually, you can go back to New Spain claiming the majority of the North American continent for its own and learn that it's only your territory if you can control it. Now, of course, that's still true as we see around the world, but it was especially true back then on the relatively unexplored North American continent because you had indigenous people who were fighting each other for land that they occupied. They didn't really own it in the sense that we talk about owning land because Western legal systems hadn't arrived on the continent. So you can't say that they owned land as we talk about it, but they occupied land and controlled some land, although boundaries were not a big thing, especially for the Comanches, which is the tribe that we're so familiar with here in Texas. And the Spanish, of course, would become familiar with as they tried to occupy and control Texas. So you had the indigenous people fighting over land that they occupied, hunting grounds, etc. Then you come in with Spain claiming this territory, but not really controlling it. Now you have the Republic of Texas claiming some territory, but we're not, and Texas is not really controlling it either. So you really only can be fairly said to possess what you can control. And so you have a continuing series of boundary disputes, boundary incursions, arguments over who owns what. But the Boundary Act of 1836, when Texas claims the boundaries, let's describe a little bit about what we claimed. The act declared that Texas's boundaries ran from the mouth of the Rio Grande, that's of course near Brownsville, Texas today, upstream along that river, and they use the deepest channel as typically what you would use when you were creating a river boundary, all the way to the source of the Rio Grande. Now, of course, that claims the Nueces Strip, which Mexico still claimed, as I mentioned. But the Rio Grande runs northwest. It runs through past El Paso and then into New Mexico and southern Colorado. In the San Juan Mountains of the Colorado are the headwaters of the Rio Grande. So Texas was claiming that territory all the way up as its western boundary, all the way up to the southwestern part of present-day Colorado. Then, according to the act, the boundary of Texas would run in a straight line due north from the source of the Rio Grande until it hit the 42nd parallel of latitude, 42nd northern parallel of latitude. And so that would create now a straight boundary to the west, and that would go all the way up through Colorado and into Wyoming. So we need to go back to 1819 for just a second and mention the Adams-Onis Treaty. The Adams-Onis Treaty defined certain boundaries between Spain and the United States. And we talk a lot about that treaty in Texas when talking about the eastern boundary of Texas, and also the sort of north-northeast boundary being the Red River, because that's one of the things that the Adams-Onis Treaty defined was the barrier between Spanish Louisiana and Texas, which then was Spanish territory. And this is, of course, after the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. So the United States had purchased Louisiana from France and had to negotiate a treaty with Spain to agree on the borders. The northern part of the border between then Mexican territory, or soon to be Mexican territory, and the Oregon Territory was settled at the 42nd parallel. So if you take a map of the 42nd parallel and you look at where it runs through the United States, and these are very, very rough. I'm just doing this for reference, so you kind of have a frame of reference. It's the 42nd parallel runs just north of Hartford, Connecticut, just north of Pennsylvania, just north of Chicago, north of Des Moines. Cheyenne, Wyoming is very, very close to the 42nd parallel. It cuts off a little southern sliver of Idaho in present-day Idaho and present-day Oregon. So that's pretty far up there, and that's where we're talking about the northern boundary of the Republic of Texas, at least as the Congress of the Republic, who were meeting in Columbia in Brazoria County, defined it. Now, I mentioned the eastern boundary having been settled by the Adams-Onis Treaty, and so that was easy to deal with. The mouth of the Sabine River, up the west bank of the Sabine to the 32nd parallel, and then north to the Red River. Of course, what they didn't know when they signed that treaty was the Red River forked. They discovered that in the middle 1800s. Go back to episode 29, Wise About Texas, and you'll hear about the Greer County land grab and the dispute that they had about that border. But in any event, for our purposes, we'll just talk about the Red River. And then that same Adams-Onis Treaty took the border on a straight line from the headwaters of the Red River to up to the Arkansas River, and that gives us the shape of the panhandle that we have today. Well, that wasn't quite clear. Let me say that again. The panhandle is shaped by those border descriptions, but the Boundary Act border, when I said Arkansas River, I meant all the way up the Arkansas River. So the Boundary Act took what you might call the panhandle of the Republic of Texas all the way up into Wyoming on both the east and the west. So we had another, I don't think the panhandle is the right term, but kind of a tail of the Republic of Texas that went very far north. Another word about that, it was easy for them to say, but nobody had explored it. So you can say, well, we're going to go to the source of the Red River. No one knew where that was. We're going to go up to the headwaters of the Arkansas. They didn't know where that was. They just said it. And that is a typical way that you described river borders. I mentioned earlier you usually use the deepest channel of the river because many rivers, especially the Rio Grande, which I was referring to earlier, has many channels. And one hard rain and you get another one. So they use the deepest channel. Well, same for the river boundaries. When you claimed territory, you would often use a river as a reference point because everyone would know where that was or could easily find it. And then you would make general descriptions of all the land around it and just say, I claim it all. For example, our friend La Salle, the famous French explorer, he came down from the Great Lakes down the Mississippi River in a canoe, which is amazing. And he claimed for France, this is how French Louisiana was formed, he claimed all the territory drained by that Mississippi River. That was his legal description of the territory. And so that gave us that huge area of Louisiana that the United States purchased in 1803. Then a little bit later, of course, he tried to land in the mouth of the Mississippi to set up an outpost there for France and missed it and ended up in Texas, but that's another story. So you make these broad, sweeping generalizations about the land that you claim. So the Republic of Texas claims, up the Rio Grande to the source, up the Red River to the headwaters, up the Arkansas to the headwaters, and nobody had ever been there. That said, now we have an interesting monument. In the 60s, the Bureau of Land Management erected a monument in what is called the Tri-Territory Site. So if you get up to the where the 42nd parallel it sits on the Continental Divide, you had the Louisiana Purchase, which of course was the United States, to the east, northeast. To the south, you had the Republic of Texas claim, and to the west, northwest, you had the Oregon country. And then west of that, you had Mexico. So you had a lot of, you had three great powers claiming an intersection of land at that point, which is great in modern times, but back then, nobody knew where that point was. So that's the Republic of Texas boundary. But as I discussed earlier, it's only yours if you can keep it. The real frontier of Texas was in northern and northwest Texas, and that was territory that was controlled by the Comanches. Now, I want to reiterate the idea of owning land versus occupying land. Texas may have owned the land legally, Texas claimed the boundary through a government that it had set up. It eventually adopted a legal system and a system of land ownership and overlaid that legal system onto unsettled areas of the land. So in our modern terms, we would say Texas owned the land, but it darn sure didn't control it. And we've had several episodes where I've mentioned hill country settlers and the Comancheria and the big dangers in northern Texas and the hill country from the Comanche frontier. And the border of the Comancheria in Texas, ill-defined though it was a lot more secure, dangerous, and firm than any border that the Republic of Texas government would claim, and that would go on until the 1870s. So you got to keep those two concepts in mind. People, of course, for mostly political reasons, will try to obfuscate those concepts, but those are two different concepts, and as is often the case, the practical overwrites the theoretical or the legal. And so what was Texas going to do with all this land that it claimed? Was it going to do anything? Could it do anything? Well, Marabou Lamar decided we ought to do something. And he initiated the second president of the Republic initiated the Santa Fe expedition in 1841. Now, Texas, you need to remember, was broke. We had financed the revolution with debt. Texas was born in debt. It would remain in debt until it joined the United States, which I'll mention in a moment. But we needed to raise revenue. And the Santa Fe Trail was well known to everybody and was a lucrative trading route running to Santa Fe, New Mexico, points east to points west. And, of course, Santa Fe falls within that claimed territory of the Republic of Texas. So Lamar decides to assemble this expedition. And I'll do one of these days specific episodes on the Santa Fe expedition. The end of the story is it was a disaster. But Lamar's idea was he was going to load up these wagons with a bunch of trade goods and go notify the residents of Santa Fe that it was their lucky day and they were now citizens of the Republic of Texas. One small problem. Mexico still controlled that area, even though Texas claimed it. There's that dichotomy again. And that was one big problem. But the more immediate problem was the expedition didn't really know how to get there. They kind of knew, but they didn't understand what it was going to take. So nutshell version is this expedition loads up, heads north, goes to basically Waco and turns left and heads for Santa Fe. Well, if you look on a map, if you do that, you're going to go right through the Llano Estacado. Big mistake. They finally arrive in around mid-September in New Mexico. People had died of disease. They were short of water. They were starving to death. They miscalculated the distance to Santa Fe. They didn't know which rivers were which. And on top of that, they're right smack in the middle of Kiowa and Comanche territory. The Mexican governor of New Mexico, Manuel Armijo, greeted his new Texan brethren with rifle shots. They took them prisoner and marched them to Mexico City, the ones that survived, that is. So that was the end of that attempt to control that part of the claimed Republic of Texas. In 1843, there were two raids that Texas arranged, and in another few episodes, I'm going to cover these. They're called the Warfield and Snively raids. I'm going to cover them in some detail, but long story short, these raids were designed to interfere with Mexican trade. They were unsuccessful. So that ended Texas's attempt to reach way, way out and control some of that territory. Shortly after that, of course, we joined the United States. Late 1845, finally official in 1846, we joined the United States. And while that supposedly gave the United States the entire Republic of Texas, what it really gave them was more border to dispute with Mexico. And that issue had still not been settled. So finally, 1846, troops are General Zachary Taylor lands on San Jose Island, marches down to Brownsville, occupying the Nueces Strip, provoking Mexico into action. Mexico acted, and we have the Mexican War, ended with a United States victory in 1848. And we have the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That finally set the Rio Grande as the border of Texas, or border of the United States. And in that treaty, Mexico ceded basically all of its possessions in the western United States. So after that, we end up with most of the United States as we know it today. But that doesn't really end the border dispute, because now we have to define what is Texas and what is the rest of the United States. So that old Republic of Texas border is still an issue. So in 1850, we have the Compromise of 1850. Now the slavery issue is what brought about this compromise. And what ended up happening is Texas got paid $10 million in exchange for that western and northern part of the supposed Republic of Texas boundaries. And that resulted in the shape of Texas that we know today, and fixed those boundaries. One of the boundary lines they used was from the Missouri Compromise, which was earlier a compromise to define slave territory and free territory. And then that money was badly needed because the Republic was in such debt. So we took care of all of that, but we gave up the New Mexico and Colorado parts of the Republic of Texas, at least for the time being. And the reason I say that is I grew up in the 70s, and we loaded up the station wagon and went to Colorado pretty much every summer, as do thousands of other Texans. Texans started buying land, building ski resorts, etc. So I'd say we probably reconquered Colorado. Apologies to my Colorado friends listening to this. Same goes for you, New Mexico. Okay. Now we come to the part of the episode I call Getting There, and I'm going to tell you how to see some of the old Republic of Texas. And all I'm going to do is kind of describe to you some areas of New Mexico and Colorado that you might visit. And when you do, you will be in the old Republic of Texas. So let's start with New Mexico. And I'm going to start in the south with Las Cruces down by El Paso, part of the old Republic, up to Alamo Gordo and Truth or Consequences, part of the old Republic. Keep going north, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, part of the old Republic. Ski resort in Taos, part of the Republic of Texas. Everything east of there as well, Roswell, etc., all part of the Republic of Texas. That would include Portales, Hobbs, Clovis, Tucumcari, Las Vegas. That's Las Vegas, New Mexico. And if you're driving up there from Texas this summer, you're going to may go through Raton Pass and into Trinidad, Colorado, part of the old Republic of Texas. Pueblo, Colorado, Canyon City, part of the Republic. If you go west of there into the Buena Vista, part of the Republic of Texas, go north to Leadville, part of the Republic of Texas. The headwaters of the Arkansas, by the way, are right around Leadville, so you can see those on the side of the road. I've been known to hang out at the Surf Hotel in Buena Vista on the porch, and you're right on the Arkansas River, so you can walk up to the bank, look across the river, and see Louisiana. If you're coming out of Denver to some of those ski resorts, Eagle, Vail, Avon, all part of the Republic of Texas. You go over the mountains, you go to Aspen, Carbondale, Basalt, that's all part of the Republic of Texas. And again, if you're up there in the summer, most of the people are probably from Texas anyway. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Wise About Texas. Thanks for listening today. Hope you have a great rest of your summer. And follow us on social media at Wise About Texas on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to support the preservation and promotion of Texas history, go to patreon.com/wiseabouttexas. Thanks again for listening. Go out and do something for Texas today. And until next time, God bless Texas, and we'll see you down the road.